He stared numbly at the unearthed graves, his family's faces hauntingly familiar among the cold, lifeless bodies exposed beneath the pale moonlight. Soon, the world would know, but the cost of speaking this truth would plunge him into a deadly storm of secrets, betrayal, and sacrifice. Jacob Carter never sought to become an enemy of the state, yet fate had chosen otherwise. Now, hunted relentlessly by forces he once trusted, and a woman whose betrayal cut deeper than any blade, he stood alone, heart pounding fiercely, determined to fight despite overwhelming odds. Truth had become his curse, but it was also his final chance at redemption. Well, friends, subscribe to our channel, and please let us know in the comments where you're watching us from and how we can improve. Thank you for your engagement, and enjoy watching. The room was filled with the stale scent of old paper and coffee stains as Jacob Carter leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. The pale glow of his monitor illuminated the cluttered desk, littered with notes and half-empty cups. Outside, New York hummed gently beneath a shroud of midnight mist, city lights blurring softly through the rain-streaked window. A sharp knock startled Jacob from his half-sleep, jolting him awake. He swung around, heart racing. Through the frosted glass door of his cramped newsroom office, he saw a blurred shadow retreating hastily into darkness. Jacob stood cautiously and opened the door. Silence. On the floor lay a plain brown envelope, unmarked, anonymous. Inside was a single flash drive. Jacob hesitated, glancing instinctively over his shoulder before inserting it into his laptop. The screen flickered, illuminating a series of images so grim they robbed him instantly of breath. Rows upon rows of freshly unearthed graves, bodies in anonymous trenches, proof of government-sanctioned excavations carried out in ruthless silence. Jacob's fingers trembled, scrolling rapidly through the horrific gallery, each image more vivid and haunting than the last. Faces stared back at him. Young activists, outspoken professors, community leaders, all declared missing months ago. His heart thumped hard against his chest, dread pooling in his stomach. "What is this?" he whispered, disbelief clouding his voice. He quickly scanned the accompanying files, official orders, emails, memos marked confidential. It was meticulous, irrefutable evidence. The sheer magnitude of the operation left him numb. He felt trapped between urgency and terror, a man suddenly burdened with knowledge that could ignite chaos. A final document caught his eye, coordinates for a meeting, scribbled hastily beneath a cryptic note. Tonight. No second chances. Jacob exhaled slowly, sweat forming on his brow as adrenaline surged. He checked the clock, 2 hours until the rendezvous. He grabbed his coat and camera, mind racing, senses heightened. The drive across town was tense, neon lights reflecting on rain-slicked asphalt, turning the familiar streets sinister. Jacob parked outside a decrepit warehouse, shadows deepening beneath graffiti-marked walls. He stepped out, anxiety pulsing through his veins. From the corner of his eye, a silhouette shifted near an alleyway. As Jacob approached, the hairs on his neck stood on end. Someone was watching him. Realization settled like ice in his bones. The truth he chased had already made him a target. He was no longer safe, and there was no turning back now. Jacob moved quietly toward the shadowed figure, standing motionless beside rusted shipping crates. As he drew closer, details emerged. Pale skin, deep-set, anxious eyes darting frantically. Edward Nolan, the former government analyst, waited nervously, pulling at his frayed sleeve with jittery fingers. "Keep your voice down," Nolan warned immediately, his whisper harsh. His gaze swept the surrounding darkness, Paranoia etched deep into his face. They're everywhere. You don't realize the danger yet. Jacob nodded quickly, understanding the urgency. What exactly am I dealing with? Nolan's eyes widened in horror. A whole network. Systematic, brutal. They're cleaning house. Anyone who dares speak up. They call it maintaining national stability. But it's... Nolan's voice trailed off, trembling, unable to finish his thought. Suddenly, headlights pierced the gloom, illuminating the warehouse windows like angry searchlights. Nolan grabbed Jacob's arm, pulling him down behind a stack of weathered pallets. They found us. Nolan gasped, fear gripping him visibly. Jacob peered cautiously around their cover, heart hammering fiercely. Four men exited a dark SUV, their figures outlined sharply in the glare of headlights. They wore civilian clothes, but their disciplined movements revealed training, cold and efficient. A muffled scream shattered the night, turning Jacob's blood cold. Another man had appeared, captured, struggling desperately against iron grips. Jacob recognized the face immediately. Marcus Riley, a prominent activist who'd vanished weeks ago. Riley's terrified gaze swept the warehouse, helplessly pleading. Nolan's breathing turned ragged. "We can't help him," he whispered desperately. "Not now." Jacob watched, frozen in horror, as Riley was forced roughly into the SUV. Tires spun on gravel, the vehicle speeding away, swallowing the activist into darkness again. Silence returned heavily, punctuated only by the distant hum of city traffic. Jacob felt sick, powerless. He turned to Nolan, fury and resolve burning through his shock. "We can't just hide forever." Nolan shook his head slowly, defeated. "You don't understand. The moment they see you're serious, they'll come for you, and everyone you care about." The weight of that warning hung heavily in the silence between them. Jacob stared at the empty spot where Riley had stood, his fears slowly morphing into steel-edged determination. "I understand enough," Jacob finally said, his voice calm, hardened by what he'd witnessed. "They won't bury this truth. I'll make sure of it." Nolan looked into Jacob's eyes, realizing he had underestimated him. The fragile analyst nodded cautiously. "Then be ready," Nolan warned, his tone grave. "Because they certainly are." Jacob straightened his jacket nervously, stepping into the glittering Manhattan penthouse, a stark contrast to the warehouse's gloom. Wealth dripped from every chandelier, silk dresses and tailored suits gliding across polished marble floors. He felt sharply out of place, a shadow intruding on a world built of bright illusions. His eyes scanned the room quickly, alert, tense. Across the elegant lounge, illuminated by the gentle flicker of candlelight, stood Marina Davis, press secretary for the administration, a woman whose career thrived within the system Jacob sought to dismantle. Her dark hair cascaded gracefully over bare shoulders, eyes sharp yet enticingly enigmatic, watching him closely. Their gazes met, tension sparking immediately, a silent challenge exchanged across the crowded space. Marina approached smoothly, confident, every step a calculated elegance. "You're Jacob Carter," she said softly, extending a delicate hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp, assessing him openly. "I've read your articles. Should I feel flattered or threatened?" Jacob replied, forcing a faint smile. She laughed gently, eyes sparkling with intrigue. "Perhaps both." Their conversation quickly became a dance, each word laced with hidden meanings, subtle probes into each other's intentions. He noticed a cautious curiosity behind Marina's charm, hints of doubt beneath her practiced composure. "Careful, Mr. Carter," she warned playfully, sipping her champagne. "Questions in this place have consequences." "I thought questions were your business," Jacob replied calmly, holding her gaze. Or is the truth too dangerous for someone in your position? Her eyes flashed briefly with genuine vulnerability before quickly hiding it beneath practiced poise. Truth is relative. Survival, on the other hand, is absolute. Jacob sensed an opening, a crack in her carefully maintained armor. Leaning closer, voice lowered, he whispered, "What if I told you survival and truth aren't enemies?" Her gaze softened, uncertain for just a moment. He saw the internal struggle clearly, the first honest moment between them. "Meet me tomorrow," Marina finally said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of elegant conversation. "I might have something you'd find interesting." Jacob nodded, adrenaline surging again, danger and hope intertwined. Their fingers brushed briefly as she handed him a discreet note. He felt a shiver run down his spine, uncertain whether from anticipation or foreboding. Marina turned gracefully, disappearing back into her glittering world, leaving Jacob alone, heart racing. He had knowingly stepped closer to the fire, unaware of how deeply the flames might burn. Jacob's pulse raced as he stood at the window of a dimly lit cafe overlooking the glittering expanse of New York City, nightlights flickering like distant embers. He glanced at his watch again. Marina was late. Anxiety prickled at the edges of his consciousness, suspicion gnawing quietly at his resolve. Finally, Marina entered, her silhouette framed softly by the cafe's neon glow. She slipped into the seat opposite him, eyes scanning nervously before meeting his. "Are you all right?" Jacob asked, noticing her trembling fingers and the uneasy dart of her eyes. "No," Marina whispered sharply, voice strained. "But I have something you need to see." Carefully, she passed him a small, encrypted drive beneath the table. Their fingertips touched briefly, electricity crackling with tension and unspoken fears. "What's on it?" Jacob asked quietly, his voice deliberately calm despite his pounding heart. Marina hesitated, biting her lower lip, eyes haunted by something deeper than mere fear. "The truth. All of it. It's even worse than you imagine. They're everywhere." Jacob saw her eyes repeatedly flick toward her phone, anxiety radiating from every movement. His instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. "Marina," Jacob pressed softly, urgency tightening his voice. "Are you sure we're alone here?" Her eyes widened slightly, fear intensifying for just a moment before she hid it again behind forced composure. I don't know. I'm not sure of anything anymore." Jacob glanced around, paranoia sharp in his chest. Outside, a black sedan lingered across the street, its windows tinted, watching silently. "Someone followed you?" Jacob asked quickly, every muscle tensed. "I'm sorry," Marina whispered, tears shimmering faintly in her eyes, guilt evident in her trembling voice. "I thought I had it under control." Jacob swallowed hard, betrayal slicing sharply through his trust, pain replacing warmth. Yet, looking at her terrified expression, he saw a conflict tearing her apart from the inside. Loyalty versus truth, duty versus love. "Just go," Jacob said abruptly, voice harsh but not without compassion. "Now, before it's too late for both of us." She hesitated briefly, eyes pleading silently for forgiveness, then rose hastily, disappearing into the bustling night. Jacob clutched the drive in his palm, heart hammering, his mind racing chaotically. Outside, the sedan pulled away, vanishing ominously into traffic, leaving Jacob with an unsettling realization. He was being hunted openly now. The line had finally been crossed, and the price for the truth had just escalated dramatically. Moonlight seeped through broken clouds as Jacob crouched low in the shadows, dirt caked beneath his fingernails. Beside him knelt Alex Barnes, an old family friend who knew the rugged landscape outside their small Massachusetts hometown better than anyone. A chill wind rustled dry leaves as they worked quietly excavating the shallow soil marked by coordinates from Marina's drive. "Are you sure about this?" Alex whispered urgently, fear heavy in his voice. "I have to know," Jacob replied fiercely, sweat mixing with grime on his forehead. Each shovel stroke carried dread deeper into his chest. Anticipation mingled with a sickening apprehension. Metal struck something solid, the sharp clang echoing ominously. Jacob's breath caught painfully, hands trembling. He knelt, gently brushing dirt away from objects buried beneath. His fingers touched cold leather and worn fabric, familiar, heartbreakingly personal. "Oh God," he whispered, pulling free an old wallet, dirt-crusted but unmistakable. Inside was a faded photograph, his parents smiling gently, his sister laughing freely. The image blurred through sudden tears, reality crashing violently upon him. "No, no, this can't be," Jacob breathed, disbelief strangling his voice. "Jacob," Alex began cautiously, eyes filled with sorrow and helplessness. Jacob couldn't respond, the world spinning wildly around him. Memories of unanswered questions and painful losses surged sharply, now twisted into a horrifying clarity. His family had vanished mysteriously years ago, and now the bitter truth stared him brutally in the face. They were victims of the very system he fought to expose. Guilt overwhelmed him, raw and suffocating. His relentless pursuit of truth had always carried a hidden hope of reunion, not this terrible revelation. He sank to his knees in silent grief, fists clenched in anguished rage. He closed his eyes, fighting to regain control. When they opened again, determination burned fiercely in their depths. The government had stolen his family and countless others, covering their deeds beneath layers of lies and silence. He wouldn't let them erase their crimes so easily. Rising slowly, Jacob took a deep, shaky breath, feeling the cold night air steady him. Alex watched quietly, sensing the transformation in Jacob's resolve. "Are you all right?" Alex asked softly, already knowing the answer. "No," Jacob replied, voice hardened with steel-edged purpose, "but I will be. They took everything from me. Now I'll take their secrecy. I'll drag their hidden horrors into the light, no matter the cost." Under the stark moonlight, Jacob vowed silently. The fight had truly begun. Jacob entered the newsroom early, exhaustion etched deep into his features, his heart still bruised from the devastating truths unearthed the night before. The familiar hum of computers and hushed voices greeted him strangely, an undercurrent of tension rippling through the usually bustling office. Immediately, he noticed something was wrong. His desk drawers were ajar, files scattered carelessly, the locked cabinet wide open. Anger flared briefly, quickly replaced by suspicion as co-workers avoided eye contact, hurried whispers breaking awkward silences. His editor, Michael Grayson, appeared suddenly, his face strained beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. "Jacob, we need to talk." Jacob nodded cautiously, following Grayson into the cramped privacy of the editor's office. Michael closed the door, sighing heavily before speaking. "Listen carefully." Michael began slowly, voice low, burdened. "You've stirred something dangerous. Powerful people are asking questions about you, and not the good kind." Jacob's heart tightened painfully, betrayal hanging thickly in the air. "Are you firing me?" "No," Michael answered quickly, genuine worry crossing his eyes. "But I'm warning you, stop this investigation. These aren't people you fight alone." Jacob met Michael's stare steadily, his resolve unshakable. "If we don't expose them now, who will?" Michael shook his head wearily. Just watch your back, Jacob. The enemy might be closer than you think. Leaving the office, Jacob's pulse quickened sharply as he spotted Marina near the newsroom entrance. Confusion spiked. Why was she here? He noticed her exchange a subtle, anxious glance with a stranger lingering in the hall. Jacob's stomach turned cold. Doubt clawed viciously into his mind. Had she betrayed him again? Marina approached hesitantly, eyes shadowed by guilt. Jacob, please let me explain. What's left to explain? He shot back bitterly, hurt bleeding through his voice despite attempts at composure. I didn't have a choice, Marina whispered urgently, fear clear in her tense expression. They're watching everything. Jacob felt torn, emotions colliding violently. Was she warning him or manipulating him further? I don't know who to trust anymore, Jacob admitted quietly, feeling dangerously exposed, vulnerable in the one place he'd once considered safe. Trust no one, Marina whispered, her voice breaking with regret. Not even me. She turned swiftly, disappearing back into uncertainty, leaving Jacob standing alone amidst the wreckage of his illusions. Heart pounding, realization struck painfully. The greatest threat he faced wasn't just lurking outside. It had infiltrated every corner of his life. The city drowned beneath sheets of relentless rain, neon lights smeared like watercolor on wet pavement. Jacob stood alone beneath an old lamp post in Central Park, drenched to the bone, eyes searching the shadows nervously. Marina had requested this urgent, secret meeting, but trust had eroded into brittle suspicion, leaving him tense and wary. A slender figure approached, umbrella tilted low to mask her face. Marina emerged into the muted glow, looking pale and worn, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Jacob, thank you for coming, she whispered, voice fragile beneath the steady drumming of raindrops. You've got 5 minutes, Jacob replied sharply, bitterness barely restrained. Explain quickly. Marina flinched at his harshness, but pressed forward. You have no idea how deep this goes. They're moving fast, too fast. You need to stop, or they'll silence you forever. Jacob's gaze hardened, fury battling heartbreak. Was that threat from them, or from you? Marina's eyes filled with pain, pleading silently. Jacob, please, it's complicated. I never wanted this. He watched her closely, catching a tremor in her voice, a hesitation revealing something unintended. How long have you been feeding them information about me? Her silence was damning, guilt shining rawly in her eyes. Jacob, you sold me out, Jacob interrupted bitterly, the sting of betrayal sharp in every word. I tried to protect you. Marina cried desperately, anguish cracking through her careful composure. But they're ruthless. They don't leave room for loyalty, only obedience. Jacob's heart twisted painfully, grief mixing dangerously with anger. Rain streamed down his face, blurring her figure, washing away the last remnants of trust. Yet even now, he recognized her struggle, the torment of a soul torn between duty and desire. You chose them, Jacob whispered harshly, voice trembling with emotion. There's nothing left between us. Thunder rumbled ominously overhead, mirroring their fractured bond. Marina stepped back, tears indistinguishable from rain. I'm sorry, she whispered brokenly, guilt staining every word. Jacob turned abruptly, forcing himself to walk away, each step painful but resolute. He didn't look back, even as Marina's sob faded into the rhythmic downpour. Trust had shattered beyond repair, leaving him utterly alone against an enemy infinitely more powerful. And yet, despite the crushing weight of betrayal, Jacob felt a strange clarity emerge amidst the storm. If he couldn't trust anyone else, he could at least trust himself. He had lost an ally but gained a sharper purpose. Nothing would stop him now. Jacob's life had become a shadowy blur of dim motels and silent midnight escapes. He moved constantly, changing identities like clothing, each one fitting poorly and temporarily. The city he once loved now felt alien, hostile, a maze designed to trap him, to silence his voice forever. Tonight, in a dingy motel room bathed in the faint neon glow from a broken sign outside, Jacob waited anxiously. The air smelled of mold and faded memories. Suddenly, a quiet knock echoed, 3 rapid taps. His heart jumped, adrenaline surging sharply. Opening the door cautiously, Jacob exhaled relief as Edward Nolan slipped inside swiftly, locking the door behind him. "They're closing in," Nolan said, his voice a hushed, tense whisper. Dark circles marked his pale face. Anxiety etched permanently into his features. "We're running out of time." Jacob nodded grimly. "We need allies, people willing to risk exposure. Do we have anyone left?" Nolan hesitated briefly, then spoke carefully. "There's a network, underground journalists, activists, truth seekers. They know your story, Jacob. They're ready to help, if you're willing to lead." A surge of hope flickered briefly inside Jacob, fragile yet fierce. "Set up the meeting." Hours later, hidden beneath a crumbling warehouse on the outskirts of Brooklyn, Jacob faced a small group of determined faces illuminated by dim lanterns. They watched him expectantly, eyes filled with hope, desperation, and defiance. One woman stepped forward confidently, her gaze intense and unwavering. "I'm Lizzie Wright. They took my brother in one of those raids. He spoke the truth, and they punished him for it. I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever." Jacob saw his own reflection in Lizzie's resolve, felt strength returning to him through the fire in her voice. He took a deep breath, preparing to speak, but sudden shouts erupted from above, heavy boots, authoritative voices echoing harshly. "Run!" Nolan shouted desperately, panic flaring violently. "They found us." Chaos exploded instantly. Jacob grabbed the encrypted drives, vital evidence clutched tightly. He ran blindly through tunnels illuminated by flickering lights, adrenaline pumping violently through his veins. Lizzie ran alongside him, calm determination contrasting starkly with the chaos around them. Emerging into darkness, breath ragged, they paused beneath a grimy street lamp, the city silent around them. Lizzie met Jacob's eyes, her gaze fierce and determined. "Tonight proves one thing," she said firmly, voice steady despite their frantic escape. "The truth terrifies them, and that means we're closer to winning than ever." Jacob nodded slowly, heart still racing. His isolation had ended. He had found his allies, and now, together, they would fight. Jacob sat in a cramped basement beneath an abandoned building, the hum of a generator filling the oppressive silence. Flickering candles cast dancing shadows on the walls, their dim glow revealing tired, yet fiercely determined faces gathered around him. At his side stood Lizzie Wright, a quiet strength radiating from her every gesture. Lizzie carefully laid out photographs and documents on a makeshift table, each item representing evidence painstakingly gathered, the truths that had cost lives to uncover. "These aren't just names and numbers," Lizzie spoke firmly, eyes glistening with a mixture of grief and anger. "Each represents a stolen life, a silenced voice." Jacob listened closely, haunted again by his family's image, now permanently etched into his memory. "We need the world to see this. We must expose everything." Lizzie met his eyes, nodding resolutely. "Then it's time to go public. No more hiding." Before Jacob could respond, heavy footsteps echoed above, sending a chill through the room. Panic surged through the group, eyes darting anxiously toward the ceiling. "They tracked us," Nolan gasped fearfully, visibly trembling. "Move now," Lizzie commanded urgently, swiftly grabbing critical documents. Jacob quickly gathered evidence, heart hammering fiercely. A door burst open upstairs, harsh commands reverberating through concrete walls. Frantic, the group scattered through narrow escape tunnels carved into forgotten foundations. Jacob and Lizzie ran together, breath ragged, senses heightened. Echoing footsteps pursued them relentlessly, gunshots cracking sharply in confined spaces, adrenaline pumping violently through Jacob's veins. A shadow loomed suddenly behind them. Jacob turned too slowly, terror gripping him, certain the chase was over. But Lizzie reacted instantly, fiercely driving their attacker backward with a strength born of desperation and fury. She pushed Jacob onward. "Go! Don't stop!" Lizzie shouted defiantly, blocking the path behind him. Jacob hesitated, heart twisting painfully, but the urgency in Lizzie's eyes forced him forward. He emerged alone onto deserted streets, gasping painfully, guilt and gratitude tangled harshly in his chest. Moments later, Lizzie staggered from the darkness, blood streaked across her cheek, but eyes blazing fiercely. She gripped his arm, her voice firm despite her injuries. "We're alive. That means we're winning." Jacob nodded, deeply inspired by her resilience, courage resonating powerfully. Standing together under dim streetlights, breathing heavily in shared silence, Jacob knew clearly they had crossed a vital threshold. They were no longer running blindly. They were fighting back openly, their voices unbreakable. In that moment, Jacob felt something he'd nearly lost: hope. Jacob stood quietly in the hidden backstage corridor of a rundown theater in Brooklyn, adrenaline pulsing steadily through his veins. Beyond the faded velvet curtains, a muted hum of anxious voices filled the auditorium. Reporters, activists, live streamers, all waiting, unaware how dramatically their world would shift tonight. Lizzie stepped beside him, eyes intense with anticipation and nerves. "Ready?" she asked softly, offering a reassuring glance. "No turning back," Jacob replied steadily, drawing strength from her presence. Taking a deep breath, he stepped onto the stage, immediately blinded by glaring spotlights. A hush descended over the room as Jacob approached the podium, microphone humming gently. Cameras fixed on him sharply, broadcasting live around the world. "My name is Jacob Carter," he began clearly, voice calm yet filled with purpose. "Tonight, I'm here to reveal crimes hidden behind carefully crafted lies." He projected vivid images onto the large screen behind him: grave sites, confidential memos, faces of vanished citizens, each piece of evidence damning in its clarity. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience, outrage and horror plainly visible. Then he paused, heart constricting briefly, voice tightening with raw emotion. "Among the victims is my family. They were taken, their lives erased, simply because they believed in truth and freedom. The government silenced them. I won't allow that silence to continue." Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the theater's entrance. Doors burst open violently, armed figures storming forward, faces masked, commands barked harshly. Panic spread instantly, cries filling the theater as chaos erupted. "Jacob, run!" Lizzie screamed urgently, rushing forward alongside Nolan, forming a protective barrier. Jacob stood frozen momentarily, watching helplessly as security forces advanced ruthlessly toward the stage. The live stream continued defiantly, the cameras still rolling, capturing every shocking moment live. A masked agent lunged toward Jacob, weapon drawn. Nolan pushed Jacob sharply toward the rear exit, shielding him bravely as Lizzie fought to clear their path through frantic crowds. Breaking free into the cold night air, Jacob's lungs burned as he sprinted desperately down shadowed alleyways, adrenaline surging violently, mind spinning with fear and determination. Finally stopping, hidden beneath rusted fire escapes, Lizzie's fierce eyes met his, breathing harsh, blood trickling from her temple. "They tried to silence us," she said fiercely, eyes blazing defiantly. "But they failed. The world has seen their true face." Jacob nodded shakily, realizing the significance of their actions tonight. They had crossed the point of no return. There was no going back, no hiding now. The war for truth had truly begun. Jacob and Lizzie crouched in silence inside an abandoned house on the outskirts of New Jersey, walls peeling, shadows thickened by the fading twilight. The air was heavy, damp with the scent of mold and decay, the tension palpable between them. Jacob leaned against the cold, cracked plaster, hands trembling slightly. The cost of their fight pressed heavily upon him. Images of Marina's betrayal, his family's tragic fate, the chaos of their escape from Brooklyn, all merging into a relentless burden. His breath shuddered as doubt clawed at his resolve. "Jacob," Lizzie whispered gently, sensing his torment. "We did the right thing. People saw the truth tonight." He closed his eyes briefly, breathing deeply, steadying himself against overwhelming despair. But at what cost? How many more lives? Lizzie moved closer, her gaze fierce yet gentle. "Every truth has a price. We've already paid too much to stop now." Suddenly, distant footsteps shattered the fragile silence. Heavy boots crunching gravel, urgent voices murmuring in the dark. Jacob's heart pounded sharply as he met Lizzie's startled eyes, adrenaline surging violently. "They found us," Lizzie hissed urgently, grabbing evidence and stuffing it hastily into her backpack. Jacob snatched the encrypted drives, pulse roaring loudly in his ears. They dashed quietly toward the rear exit, emerging into a tangled labyrinth of overgrown alleys and rusting chain-link fences. Voices erupted behind them, flashlights slicing harshly through darkness. Jacob and Lizzie sprinted desperately, weaving erratically through narrow pathways, gasping for breath as their pursuers relentlessly closed in. Ahead loomed an old railway bridge, towering ominously above turbulent waters churning furiously below. Footsteps echoed closer, voices sharp, aggressive, demanding surrender. Panic twisted through Jacob, instincts screaming urgently. There was nowhere left to run. Lizzie met his eyes, determination blazing fiercely despite fear. "Trust me," she urged, gripping his hand tightly. "We jump." Jacob stared down at the icy, dark water, uncertainty clashing violently with necessity. "Are you sure?" "No choice," Lizzie whispered, her grip unyielding. "It's the only way forward." A shout erupted nearby, flashlight beams cutting dangerously close. Without another second to hesitate, they leaped together, plummeting toward the raging river below. Cold water struck them brutally, swallowing them into chaotic darkness. Jacob surfaced, gasping painfully, lungs burning, Lizzie beside him, determined and resilient. They swam desperately toward shore, emerging soaked and shivering, but alive, still defiant against impossible odds. Jacob knew instantly there was truly no turning back. The flames of their battle now burned brighter than ever. Marina stood rigidly at the edge of a crowded government office, her world fracturing rapidly, every whispered conversation deepening the chasm between reality and illusion. The marble floors and polished corridors she once admired now felt cold, tainted by lies and corruption she could no longer ignore. Nearby, she overheard powerful men casually discussing recent operations, their voices detached, indifferent to the human cost. Her blood chilled at their calm cruelty, their words echoing with ruthless efficiency, making her complicit silence unbearable. Unable to endure the suffocating atmosphere, Marina quickly retreated outside, rain falling softly upon her shaking shoulders, masking tears of rage and self-disgust. She had believed loyalty and duty justified silence, but now saw clearly. Her allegiance had chained her to darkness. Determined to make amends, she clutched a flash drive tightly, evidence meticulously gathered, every secret carefully downloaded. It represented her penance, a chance to restore at least a fragment of her integrity. Hours later, beneath a dreary sky thick with storm clouds, Marina met discreetly with Jacob's trusted friend, Oliver Benson, in a deserted park. Anxiety tightened her chest, guilt gnawed sharply at her resolve. Oliver watched her skeptically, his voice cautious. "Why should I trust you, Marina?" "Because I have nothing left to lose," Marina admitted softly, eyes raw with sincerity. "Take this, it's everything. Evidence they can't bury, truths they won't escape." She handed over the flash drive, her hand trembling visibly. Oliver's eyes widened slightly, realizing the weight of her offering. "What about Jacob?" he asked carefully, watching her closely. Pain flashed deeply in Marina's expression, vulnerability piercing through. "Tell him, I'm sorry. I chose wrong, but he still can choose right." Oliver nodded slowly, recognizing genuine remorse in her voice. "I'll make sure he knows." As he walked away, Marina stood alone in the growing darkness, a bitter weight finally lifting slightly from her heart. The truth she betrayed was now her redemption. She had shattered illusions, exposing herself openly to danger, accepting consequences willingly. Returning to her empty apartment, shadows dancing eerily on pale walls, Marina knew the storm she unleashed tonight would consume her. But she felt no regret, only relief. For the first time in her life, she had chosen truth over survival. Her world had crumbled, but from its ruins emerged clarity, a painful yet necessary freedom. Marina knew clearly her days were numbered, yet this sacrifice had become her peace. Jacob and Lizzie slipped quietly into Washington, the city's monumental buildings rising imposingly around them, shrouded in early morning mist. Their nerves stretched thin, urgency pulsating beneath forced calm. With Marina's newly provided evidence secured, every step felt heavier, the weight of their mission immense. They entered the Capitol discreetly, hearts racing, guided by Senator David Hudson, an opposition leader quietly sympathetic to their cause. Hudson met them near a marble staircase, his gaze sharp, cautious. "You've stirred a storm," he murmured quietly. "But this evidence, it could end everything." Jacob nodded, determination stealing his voice. "Then let's make sure everyone hears it." Hudson ushered them quickly through labyrinthine hallways toward a discreet meeting room deep inside the Senate building. Inside, representatives from international human rights groups waited anxiously, faces tense, expectant. Jacob prepared to present the damning documents, heart pounding heavily. Suddenly, shouts erupted down the hall, panicked aides scattering, urgent warnings shouted. "They're coming," Hudson warned sharply, eyes blazing fiercely. "We need to move now." Chaos surged instantly. Security personnel burst into the corridor, weapons drawn, orders barked aggressively. Jacob scrambled, documents clutched tightly, mind racing as Hudson shielded him urgently, directing him swiftly toward a hidden exit. Lizzie moved decisively, fiercely protecting Jacob, fighting desperately against surging agents attempting to seize critical evidence. Hudson stood firm, blocking the way, sacrificing his reputation openly, shouting courageously into the chaos. "Get out now. Show the world." Jacob stumbled through narrow passages, breath ragged, heart hammering violently, Lizzie at his side, fiercely protective. Emerging suddenly into daylight, he felt a brief surge of hope, until a sharp sound cracked behind them. He turned quickly, glimpsing Hudson bravely standing amidst chaos, shouting defiantly as security swarmed him. Jacob felt guilt pierce painfully through his chest, knowing the senator's career, perhaps life, was destroyed for helping him. Lizzie grabbed Jacob's arm, urgency flooding her voice. "We can't stay. We have to get this evidence out." Together they fled rapidly, fading into crowded city streets, anonymous faces masking their escape. Yet Jacob's heart twisted painfully, burdened by Hudson's sacrifice. Every victory exacted another harsh toll. In a shadowed alley, breathless and exhausted, Jacob gripped the precious files tightly, knowing clearly their war had escalated dramatically. The chains binding Truth had begun breaking, but the price had grown dangerously high. Jacob sat rigidly beneath bright studio lights, tension humming through the air like an electric current. Across from him, Thomas Grant, head of the secretive agency behind the atrocities, watched with cold composure, his expression arrogantly confident. Cameras rolled silently, broadcasting every word live. "Tonight we address serious allegations," the host announced gravely, setting a tense atmosphere. "Mr. Carter, you accuse Mr. Grant's agency of severe human rights abuses. Can you prove it?" Jacob leaned forward calmly, voice steady despite nerves twisting sharply inside him. "I have evidence, irrefutable and undeniable. Your agency systematically targeted innocent citizens under the guise of national security." Grant scoffed dismissively, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "Pure fiction, sensationalism disguised as journalism." Jacob's gaze sharpened. "Fiction doesn't bury bodies, Mr. Grant. I've personally uncovered graves. Your orders authorized every single one." The tension thickened palpably, audience murmurs rippling anxiously. Grant's facade flickered briefly, barely concealed fury slipping through. "Careful, Carter. Accusations carry severe consequences. Threatening me won't erase the truth," Jacob replied firmly, meeting Grant's stare defiantly. Grant shifted tactics abruptly, voice mocking, attempting to undermine Jacob's credibility. "You've suffered personal tragedy. Perhaps grief clouds your judgment." Jacob felt anger flare dangerously, memories of his family rising sharply, yet he maintained composure. "My tragedy wasn't an accident. It was a direct consequence of your commands." Grant smiled coldly, leaning closer. "You're playing a dangerous game. I suggest you stop before more people get hurt." Jacob's voice dropped, fierce and resolute. "No, this ends tonight. You can't silence everyone." Grant's composure cracked visibly, eyes blazing openly now. "You're naive. Ideals don't survive reality. Order demands sacrifice." Jacob's voice resonated powerfully, filled with quiet authority. "Order without justice is tyranny. Your sacrifices are lives stolen without mercy." The studio audience, initially silent, erupted into fervent murmurs, voices of disbelief shifting toward outrage. Grant's eyes widened slightly, realizing the tide turning against him. The host intervened swiftly, attempting neutrality, but the confrontation had shattered carefully maintained illusions. Cameras captured Grant's faltering expression, his power suddenly exposed as cruel vulnerability. Jacob stood slowly, the room quieting instantly, his voice carrying clearly, resolutely. "Truth isn't negotiable. No matter how powerful, no one outruns accountability forever." As applause erupted spontaneously, Jacob met Grant's furious glare steadily, knowing the face-to-face confrontation had irrevocably shifted the battle's momentum. He had exposed the monster openly, and now the world saw clearly the darkness behind the mask. The sun dipped slowly behind Manhattan's skyline, bathing rooftops in shades of fiery amber and deep violet. Jacob stood alone atop a high-rise building, city noises distant, muffled by altitude and wind. His heart tightened sharply as Marina stepped quietly onto the rooftop, her figure silhouetted starkly against the glowing horizon. Her face was pale, eyes heavy with regret and pain. She approached cautiously, voice barely audible over the gentle wind. "Jacob, I know I have no right, but please, hear me out." Jacob's chest tightened painfully, resentment clashing violently with memories of love and trust once shared. "You betrayed me. How can I trust anything you say?" Marina's gaze filled deeply with sorrow. "You can't. But I betrayed myself more. Every lie I told poisoned me slowly. I'm here because truth matters now, even if you never forgive me." Jacob's anger faltered slightly, seeing genuine remorse etched deeply into her features. "Why help me now?" "Because I still love you," Marina confessed softly, vulnerability raw and open. "And because silence makes me complicit, I won't remain silent anymore." Jacob's resolve trembled, pain and longing warring fiercely within him. Before he could respond, sudden footsteps echoed sharply. Agents storming onto the rooftop, guns drawn, faces coldly professional. "Jacob Carter, you're under arrest," a voice shouted, command slicing sharply through the tense air. Marina reacted instantly, stepping defiantly between Jacob and the advancing agents, arms outstretched protectively. "No, this ends here." Jacob watched helplessly, panic rising sharply. "Marina, don't." She glanced back briefly, eyes filled with determination and finality. "Run, Jacob. Let my choice be redemption." In the chaotic seconds that followed, Marina rushed forward, deliberately drawing the agent's attention, sacrificing herself openly. Jacob staggered backward, horrified and grief-stricken, forced to flee urgently as gunfire erupted behind him. He escaped down fire escapes, heart-wrenching painfully with each desperate step, guilt and grief suffocating him. Marina's final act, her sacrifice, branded itself into his memory with permanent clarity. Hours later, hidden safely away, Jacob collapsed, exhausted and broken, Marina's final words echoing relentlessly. Redemption found through ultimate sacrifice. Her betrayal had scarred him deeply, yet her courage tonight restored something vital, reigniting the spark of hope and purpose. She had chosen truth over safety, love over fear. Her sacrifice became his unbreakable resolve. Jacob would honor Marina's memory fiercely, ensuring her sacrifice was never in vain. Redemption had come at a brutal cost, but it had finally set them both free. Jacob stared silently at the handwritten letter Marina had left behind, its edges worn from repeated reading, her final words etched painfully into his consciousness. Dawn struggled faintly through dense Washington fog, casting a pale, ghostly glow across the dim safe house where Jacob, Lizzie, and their remaining allies planned their final move. The room felt oppressive, thick with exhaustion and anticipation. Lizzie approached cautiously, gently breaking the heavy silence. "Are you ready?" Jacob nodded slowly, eyes fixed resolutely on Marina's letter. "We've lost too many. This ends now." Outside, the city stirred to cautious life, unaware of the explosive truths soon to be unleashed. Jacob's team quietly prepared materials, every secret meticulously documented, each atrocity clearly exposed. Their careful planning now hinged on a final, decisive revelation. Yet anxiety shadowed their every move, paranoia heightened sharply. Each noise made hearts leap nervously, every shadow holding potential danger. The government's ruthless pursuit had forced them underground, into hiding, hunted relentlessly. Lizzie squeezed Jacob's shoulder reassuringly, sensing his internal turmoil. We're fighting for everyone silenced. Marina, your family, countless others. The world needs this truth. Jacob exhaled slowly, determination returning with her words. Carefully, he finalized evidence files, the data irrefutable, comprehensive, damning. Marina's final gift, the internal structure and identities within the clandestine agency, completed their arsenal. It's ready, Jacob announced firmly, confidence strengthening his voice. The world won't be able to ignore this. Suddenly, a distant sound, approaching vehicles, tires crunching gravel, sent icy fear racing through the group. Jacob's pulse quickened sharply. They've found us again, Nolan whispered frantically, panic flaring. Lizzie reacted immediately, grabbing evidence urgently. Move quickly, take everything. We can't lose this now. Jacob and his team scattered swiftly, hearts hammering, as government agents stormed aggressively toward the safe house. Darkness erupted into chaos, shouts and commands echoing harshly, flashlights slicing through shadows. Jacob escaped narrowly, sprinting desperately down dim alleys, Lizzie beside him, gripping crucial files fiercely. Behind them, their hideout burned brightly, flames illuminating the ruthless desperation of their pursuers. Yet despite danger and fear, Jacob felt strangely calm. They had unveiled the darkness completely, stripping away every illusion. The enemy's desperate violence confirmed the power of their truth. Pausing briefly beneath a flickering street lamp, Jacob met Lizzie's unwavering gaze. It's done, he breathed firmly. They can't hide from this. Lizzie nodded, eyes shining defiantly. The world would finally see clearly the horrors hidden beneath carefully constructed lies. Victory felt close, tangible, and worth every risk they'd taken. Times Square pulsated fiercely beneath massive electronic billboards, lights dazzling, bathing thousands gathered below in vibrant neon hues. Jacob stood concealed behind the makeshift stage, heart pounding violently, his breath tight. Around him, allies moved swiftly, urgency palpable, their preparations meticulous for this moment of truth. Lizzie placed a reassuring hand on Jacob's shoulder, her voice steady amidst the chaos. They're ready, everyone's watching. It's now or never. Taking a deep breath, Jacob stepped onto the platform, immediately blinded by glaring lights and overwhelmed by thunderous cheers erupting spontaneously. Faces stretched endlessly before him, hope and expectation clearly visible. My name is Jacob Carter. He began firmly, voice resonating powerfully through speakers, echoing sharply through the vast square. Today, we reclaim our truth. Behind him, massive screens flashed evidence, shocking images, internal documents, chilling video confessions. Gasps rippled through the crowd, horror mixing rapidly with outrage. Jacob spoke steadily, each revelation devastating, stripping bare every hidden atrocity. Suddenly, angry shouts echoed sharply. Armed government agents emerged, pushing aggressively through crowds, intent on silencing Jacob permanently. Fear surged momentarily, yet Jacob refused to retreat. He faced them boldly, voice defiant. You can silence one voice, but you can't silence millions, Jacob shouted, strength radiating fiercely from his words. We stand united. Inspired, the crowd reacted instantly, forming a protective wall around Jacob. Ordinary citizens boldly confronting heavily armed agents, chanting defiantly, Truth prevails. Jacob watched, heart swelling powerfully. The crowd's bravery transformed into unbreakable unity. Human chains locked arms, defying intimidation, shielding him courageously. Agents hesitated, clearly unnerved, their power visibly faltering beneath relentless public defiance. Cameras broadcasted everything live, every violent attempt to suppress truth backfiring dramatically. The crowd's chants intensified, echoing through Times Square, spreading rapidly through live streams and global broadcasts. Voices rose fiercely from cities worldwide, solidarity erupting explosively, demands for justice unstoppable. Realizing defeat, agents withdrew reluctantly, retreating into shadows, powerless against collective strength. Jacob exhaled shakily, relief flooding through him, pride in humanity's courage overwhelming. Lizzie joined him on stage, eyes shining brilliantly. They heard us. The world finally sees clearly. Jacob nodded slowly, overwhelmed yet hopeful. Their storm of justice had finally broken wide open, the thunderous demand for accountability impossible to silence. Tonight, the people reclaimed their power, and nothing could ever bury their truth again. Jacob stood resolutely before the imposing columns of the Supreme Court, the marble steps crowded with cameras, reporters, and anxious spectators. Sunlight streamed sharply across the scene, illuminating tense faces awaiting justice. Today, Thomas Grant faced public judgment, the confrontation unavoidable, truth finally demanding accountability. Inside the packed courtroom, silence settled thickly as Jacob approached the witness stand. Grant watched intently, eyes narrowed, arrogance barely masking rising anxiety. "You've accused Mr. Grant's agency of severe crimes against humanity," the judge declared solemnly, voice echoing sternly. "Present your final evidence." Jacob spoke clearly, calmly revealing meticulous details, documents, testimonies, undeniable proof of atrocities committed. Each revelation landed heavily, faces around the courtroom shifting rapidly from shock to horror. Grant rose abruptly, voice harsh, attempting desperate deflection. "This is absurd, a political witch hunt driven by vengeance." Jacob met Grant's stare steadily, unwavering. "Your victims aren't political pawns. They were innocent people silenced by orders bearing your signature." Grant's composure fractured openly, panic flickering through his expression. "Lies," he shouted defensively, voice cracking, betraying his guilt. "We did what was necessary." A stunned silence filled the courtroom, Grant's admission hanging starkly. Jacob seized the moment calmly, voice powerful, controlled. "Necessary? Families destroyed, lives ended, freedom crushed. That's your definition of necessary." Grant stammered, flustered, desperately searching for justification. His facade crumbled rapidly beneath relentless scrutiny, cameras capturing his unraveling clearly, broadcasting it worldwide. Jacob faced the judge confidently, voice ringing clearly. "Justice demands accountability. This isn't about vengeance, it's about truth." The judge nodded slowly, gravity settling heavily upon the courtroom. "Given compelling evidence and public admissions, Mr. Grant, your agency's actions constitute severe criminal misconduct." Jacob felt profound relief sweep through him as gasps rippled dramatically around the room. Grant slumped visibly, defeated, power stripped completely. Stepping from the stand, Jacob met Lizzie's gaze, her expression fierce with pride and vindication. They had faced the monster openly, refusing intimidation, exposing every lie until truth stood undeniable. Outside, cheers erupted spontaneously, crowds roaring triumphantly as Jacob emerged, sunlight warm upon his face. He exhaled deeply, tension finally easing, replaced by clarity and fulfillment. Justice prevailed openly today, a final reckoning forcing darkness into accountability's harsh spotlight. Jacob knew clearly their struggle had shifted history dramatically. The fight had been brutal, costly, yet now undeniably victorious. The truth had finally won. In cities nationwide, people poured into the streets, united by hope and a thirst for justice long suppressed. Jacob watched from atop the steps of a grand public square, morning sun bathing crowds below in brilliant, golden warmth. The air buzzed with electrifying optimism, a nation awakening from painful silence. Beside him stood Lizzie, eyes vibrant, reflecting determination that had carried them through darkness. Together, they'd ignited something profound, an unstoppable wave of change reshaping society openly. Jacob raised his voice clearly, echoing powerfully across the gathered thousands. Today, we've reclaimed our voice, our dignity, our truth. We won't go back to silence. Cheers erupted passionately, echoing powerfully, emotions raw, honest, triumphant. Faces of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs stood shoulder to shoulder, united by newfound courage. Days turned to weeks, momentum steadily rising. Jacob tirelessly worked alongside Lizzie, establishing foundations for victim support, fighting fiercely for reforms. Every speech he delivered resonated deeply, inspiring resilience, empowering communities nationwide. Gradually, justice replaced fear. Accountability dismantled corruption's foundations. Jacob found personal healing in every action, each victory honoring lives lost. Marina, his family, countless victims whose silence had ended. Yet amidst sweeping transformation, quiet moments deeply touched Jacob most profoundly. A mother tearfully thanking him for revealing her daughter's fate. Families reunited after years of anguish, each encounter reinforcing the meaning behind their battle. One peaceful evening, Jacob stood quietly overlooking the capital, illuminated softly beneath twilight skies. Lizzie joined him gently, her presence warm, comforting. "We've done it," she whispered, a quiet awe filling her voice. Jacob nodded thoughtfully, heart finally at peace. It's just beginning. But at least now, people know their power. They'll protect truth fiercely. Lizzie smiled softly, understanding deeply. "You gave them hope again, Jacob." He exhaled slowly, humbled yet fulfilled. "No, we did. All of us, together." Below them, city lights sparkled brilliantly, symbolizing rebirth, courage conquering fear, unity healing divisions. Jacob felt profound gratitude, recognizing clearly how far they'd come, sacrifices made undeniably meaningful. As dawn approached, skies painted gently in hues of soft lavender and gold. Jacob knew their nation had crossed permanently from shadow into clarity. Their painful struggle had birthed genuine freedom, truth permanently etched into collective consciousness. Hope now illuminated every path ahead, guiding a nation forward confidently, bravely into this new dawn. Jacob stood quietly before a peaceful grave in his small hometown, the gentle rustle of leaves whispering softly around him. Morning sun filtered delicately through trees, casting warm golden patterns across the simple headstones. At his feet lay fresh flowers, vibrant with life, carefully placed in memory of his parents and sister. Kneeling slowly, Jacob felt a deep, profound stillness settle gently within him, grief softened by time, purpose replacing anguish. His voice, quiet yet unwavering, carried softly into the tranquil silence. "I made a promise here once, to find the truth, no matter the cost. It nearly destroyed me, but it saved many others. Today, I can finally say, It was worth it. His eyes glistened slightly, bittersweet memories rising gently, carried softly upon morning breeze. Footsteps approached quietly, breaking gently through his reverie. Lizzie appeared at his side, offering a comforting presence, silent yet deeply supportive. "You've honored them well," she whispered softly, sincerity filling every word. Jacob nodded slowly, profound peace finally embracing him openly. "The pain won't vanish completely, but now I see clearly. Truth sets us free." Lizzie reached gently for his hand, her warmth comforting, reassuring. "And that freedom belongs to all of us now." They stood together, sunlight warming them gently, birdsong softly filling serene air. Jacob felt weight lifting gradually from his heart, replaced fully by calm acceptance, quiet strength returning steadily. Slowly, they walked together down a lush, green path, leading gently away from sorrow, toward hope's open embrace. Around them, nature breathed softly, vibrant life gently affirming renewal. The horizon brightened beautifully, sunrise illuminating endless possibilities, their future clear, optimistic, unburdened. Jacob paused briefly, looking back once more at peaceful graves, his voice quiet, resolute. "I'll never stop fighting to protect the truth." Lizzie squeezed his hand gently, understanding deeply his commitment. "And I'll always stand with you." Together, they stepped confidently forward, leaving shadows permanently behind, embracing fully this new beginning, one earned through courage, sacrifice, and relentless belief in truth's enduring power. Ahead lay boundless opportunities, their struggles transformed meaningfully into hope, purpose shining brightly in every action, every step forward. Jacob smiled softly, heart finally free. The truth had brought pain, yet it delivered redemption, clarity, and unity. Beyond the truth, he discovered genuine freedom, a freedom that now belonged to them all. In the quiet stillness of dawn, Jacob stood at the crossroads where truth and loss converged, gazing out at a world forever altered by courage. The echoes of his struggle still lingered, lives sacrificed, hearts broken, and the heavy weight of truths long buried finally unearthed. Yet amidst the scars, hope blossomed gently like a fragile flower pushing through cold, unyielding earth. Jacob had learned that truth, however painful, was the only force strong enough to break the chains of fear and silence. As sunlight spread warmly across the horizon, he knew his journey had just begun. Truth is not merely something we discover, it's something we become. And once embraced, it sets us forever free.